Hi everyone, Anthony Cummins here, author and outright YouTube clown. So we're going to talk about the difficulties of culture. Now before we do that, we're going to do always, please do support me, How to Be a Modern Samurai, 10 Steps to Finding Your Power and Achieving Success. This keeps me afloat, this keeps me doing it. So please guys, if you're considering buying a book, get one. It's coming to Christmas, so start getting ready for the old gifts. Started buying these for gifts for fathers and stuff like that. Right, okay, this video may be a little bit long. I've no idea. I'm going to do it totally unscripted, as most of my videos. I'm going to be talking broadly, so apologies if I get any little inaccuracies out there from history. What I'm trying to do with this video is just dig down to the core aspect of people mistaking culture research and researching culture, etc, etc. This video, the reason I'm in a bit of a rush to do the video is because I'm going off for a week to see my girlfriend. So I've got to pack, finish work, get the house sorted and all that. So I can't put little screeny shots at the side. I apologise. So I'm going to do this in one take and probably struggle about halfway through and I've totally lost where I'm going. So apologies. But this is more for the dedicated, hardened researcher fan base. Okay, now I've been talking to Les Conn, and if you don't know who Les Conn is, just type in Les Conn. It's C-O-N-N, and subscribe to Les. And also John Hater, I'd tell you to subscribe to him, but he's a lazy bugger. Finger, pull it out, John. Get a channel, do some work. Doesn't do anything. So there you go. So I've been talking to these guys, and we're talking about the problems with understanding researching culture and how not the research given, but how the research taken can be a problem. Now, for example, I've recently been talking about ninja from Babylon or ninja from India. And these are not me saying ninjas are from Babylon, ninjas are from India. These are me saying to you, hey, look at this information. What do you think to this? So, and I did say at the beginning of all those videos is like, I'm not saying they're from there, but look at these cool things that are going on in history. How have we got there? If you don't know what I'm talking about, please look up Ninja India, Ninja Babylon. You'll see what I'm doing. Right. So the point being is people are going away and saying, oh, well, Anthony says ninja from Babylon and ninja from India. That's not what Anthony's saying at all. Watch the bloody video. So if you've been sent this video by an angry Les Conn, typing at you, going, and send it to you in a very South African accent, even though he's from Zimbabwe. And I get told off for these, not knowing the distinction. This is why you've got it. There you go. Right, guys. So let's get to it. We're 2 minutes in and he's rambling already. Okay, so basically, researching culture, trying to find somebody's culture is extremely difficult because of the person viewing it and also sometimes the person giving it. You go through the lens of the receiver and the giver, which is a problem. So where do we start? Basically, at the essence of all historical research, all history, all archaeology, all everything is two things. Did the people we're talking about invent something and make it part of their culture, or did they inherit it from somebody else? That's it. So making fire. Did one person invent it and then it spread all over the world? Or did multiple people invent it at different places at different times? Metal, making swords. Did one person invent it and it spread out? Dissemination it's called. Or was it independently discovered all over the world? That is the big question. Now there's categories. Some things are just all over the world, people get them. Probably fire is one of them. Learning where safe water is and where safe water is not. Learning about poisonous plants. Normally, it's not one person found out the poisonous plant and then somebody on the other side of the world has waited for that technology to come all the way across. Somebody's probably ate it on both sides of the world and go, like that, you know what I mean? Dead. So that's independently brought up. Whereas some things are passed on. Now, also, there's another problem with this. So the second major problem is nationalism, politics, etc, etc. Some people will absolutely stick to certain things because of nationalism and like, we wasn't told that, nobody told us. So, for example, famous people like this are the Germans, Nazi World War II, didn't inherit anything from anyone, just the Aryan race, and they were all like, that's what they did. And of course, Chinese people today are like, China is the greatest thing on and sliced bread. Nobody, influenced them, nothing. There was even one guy who was measuring Chinese skulls and saying, look, the Chinese are a totally separate, like, human species to everyone else. Everyone else in the world is from Africa. The Chinese are from China. It was like, okay, I don't think, by measuring some skulls. And you could see I was watching this program, and this woman is like, I don't think that's how it works. We've got DNA now. So do you see what I mean? So whether it's true or not, what my point is nationalism comes in. So, for example, if you say something now about Indo-European people, which I do genuinely enjoy, of course, you can't mention the word Aryan. Oh my God, then Black Lives Matter gets started. So you see what I'm saying? What actually happened in the past has nothing to do with what's going on now, in the sense, but people will twist and manipulate it. And I was talking with Jay Kane about this the other day in the car. They will manipulate it, okay? The third major problem is the fact of your assumptions, your assumption. So we use in PhD thesis, in peer-reviewed journals, nobody reads them bar about 3 people. Honestly, I read them and you yawn fest. It's a yawn fest. Because they won't say Western European culture. They won't say Eastern European culture. They'll say Yamnaya culture, Beaker culture, Kurgan culture, and then they'll YX14 culture, and you're like, I'm lost. And I'm like, I once listened to 13-hour academic course. I have an Audible channel, and it's the Great Courses, and I listened to Wheels, Language, and something, which was the origins of the steppe people, it fascinates me. The origins of the steppe people. Oh my God. It was a 13-hour archaeological peer-reviewed journal, basically, in my car. I went to Norfolk twice. I was like, it was fascinating, beyond fascinating. I loved it. But oh my God, was it the dreariest writing in the world. Kurgan culture, Yamnaya, 4836, moving to the bit. And I spent an hour listening to how the bits had worn away teeth on horses, so they knew whether they were metal or bone. And oh my God. But my point being is, you don't listen to that. You've come to YouTube. I'm the guy who goes and listens to that, so I can put it to you. So when I say things like Indian culture, Chinese culture, Japanese culture, British culture, English culture, Anglo-Saxon culture, we are assuming that you guys on the other end are going, okay, they're modern terms for certain things. So what you guys have to do is say, when he's saying Chinese culture, what does he mean? So it came up with Les. It's like, are we talking about biologically Han people? Are we talking about the white Caucasian Chinese who are clearly there in the historical record in the Terran Basin, which is what brought this up? Are we talking about the Mongol dynasty? I can't remember. Somebody click it below. Which dynasty? Everyone goes about Chinese dynasty this, Chinese dynasty that. It's actually the Mongols. The Mongols come in, boop, boop, bop a few heads in China. Imagine all the Chinese helmets have popped up and somebody's playing the old Star Wars on them, in the Cantina band. Bing! You know what I mean? That Chinese helmet's going off. They're actually Mongolians. So when we say Chinese culture to you guys, obviously you have to then say, well, China's a modern concept, to a level. And if you further back you go, the more broken up it becomes and the more tribal it becomes. So when I'm talking about things coming across, for example, Indo-European into China, bringing the horse with them, we're talking about 2000 BC, 1500 BC, probably before China is fully China. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I'm not an expert in Chinese history by a long shot. I'm still new to it. But my point being is, there's a point where China is considered China proper, and there's a point where it's a coalition of clans. But because I don't want to say, well, in 2000 BC you'll find this culture here and there, because you guys are going to switch off straight away if you've not already switched off on this video. So I say Chinese culture, and you on the other hand have to put that into, okay, well, we're looking at that time. So basically, it's not what we consider Chinese culture today, but it's the birth of Chinese culture. Okay, you with me? So for example, we always say Buddhism is from India. Now, this is something that's said everywhere, but it's pointed out that India at the time was broken up into lots of different places, and we got the trade routes going round. And what you can consider the Indian continent, subcontinent, is the fact that we use that so you guys know where we're talking about. Obviously, it's not the modern India we're talking about. We're not talking about divisions with Pakistan. We're not talking about Muslims are not even invented at that point. There are no Muslims in this time period that we're talking about in ancient China, and Buddhism coming across It's before that. And then Muslims appear and wipe out the Buddhists, basically, and start attacking monasteries and all sorts because they didn't exist, when Buddhism first established. Get my dates right there. So that's where we're up to. So for you guys, when I say, I am getting to my point, guys. I'm told you this is going to be a rambling video, so do keep up. Little bicycle, keep up. Right, so basically, some things arrive independently. Some things arrive because they're passed on from people. That's the historian, the researcher's thing. You're saying, where is this from? Where is it passed on to? You've also got to realise when you listen to something, somebody's got a point to tell you. And you've got to be careful here. A lot of the times it comes with a bias. And we're in a world today where that's more than ever. You thought Nazi Germany was bad for bias. We're in like the time when it's really biased now. I'm not going to get into that in this channel, but oh my God, 2020 is the most biased historical things you've ever heard. They have literally made it so simple that it no longer is correct. So there's a difference between simplification and reductionism. Reductionism is where you take it back so far that it's no longer realistic. That's not what we're saying. Simplification is like, here's the many parts simplified for you to understand. There you go. Because you guys do not have time to do it. I have time to go through all of that and bring it to you guys in a babbling manner. So what we've got, nationalism, and then you have to realize that actually when we say certain words like China, Japan, we're actually talking about concepts that you understand, but you have to program in your mind that actually back in the day it might not quite have been as solid as China and India. But we are assuming that you know that because, most people know that. Right, okay. So the next thing you have to look at when you're doing culture is whether you're talking about DNA, genetical culture, passing on evolution of people, or if you're talking about material culture and culture, how they live. So let me give you an example. So if you are Chinese today, you're a Chinese person, and you have a suit on with a tie, and you have a wallet with a credit card, and you have a flip phone, you're pretty much a product of modern Western culture. These were all products of Western culture. Take it back a bit, you've got a suit on, you're using a ballpoint pen, not a quill. You're getting in a train, steam train, let's take it back a bit further, and you're staying in a brick house with, all that sort of, you're literally living Western culture, but your DNA is from China. So what happens is you get the going back period. So there's a lot of debate on this, and this kicks off a lot of debate, but people say, are we out of Africa or not out of Africa? I'm not interested in that debate, but let's just go with the out of Africa one, okay? Whether you believe it or not, we'll just use it as an example. So people say, oh, well, we're all from Africa anyway. But then you say, well, we're all from the sea. So what do you mean? So people say, because you say, oh, this is British culture. And people say, well, you're from Africa. You're like, but we're all from the sea. So are we all mermaid culture? Do we flap around? Blah, blah, blah. Do you know, where's the shut-off point? There has to be a shut-off point. But you have to be careful with that shut-off point because there's biology and then there's culture. So my biology, I did a 2 DNA test. I'm pretty much roughly 50% Scandinavian in the north, not in my bedroom. And I'm roughly 50% Irish Celtic. And that means I am Indo-European pretty much through and through. I have apparently a couple of bits of DNA in me from the Romans. And that's about it for my foreign DNA, if you like. But the further you go back with that, the closer I will come to you're from Africa. And if you go even further back, I'm from the sea, I'm a fish. So where do we stop? Well, in biological evolution, that's where it becomes difficult. We're not dealing with that. We're talking about cultural evolution and cultural movements and cultural dissemination, okay? So where did culture stop? So let's go back to Roman Britain. Somebody's in Roman Britain. One day, they're with the Iceni, they're with Queen Boudica, whichever way you want to say it. She's murdering a few Romans. Have at you, sir. She's being proper English. And then even though she's not English, the English are Anglo-Saxon. She's a dirty Celt, like the Welsh and oh, that's me. And then, so basically, she's there. And they kill her off, blah, blah, blah. Her people then adopt Roman culture. They have baths, they have togas, they've got villas, they change their gods to Jupiter and all that stuff. But they're biologically Celtic, they're biologically from Britain, they're Britons. but they're culturally Romans. So which one are they? That's where everybody gets confused, especially obviously today with the culture wars. It's like, well, most people are Western culture. There's no disputing that. If you do, you're a bit pots in the head. Most people live a Western culture life now. Hospitals, police, the internet, all those things. We have modern Western culture infiltrated the world. So what you've got to remember is that. So when we will get back to the ninja guys, don't worry. So what I'm saying here is when we talk about the Japanese, we have to say, did the Japanese ninja just exist, just pop into existence? Now, Les's argument is that there's clearly an antecedent in Japan. And my argument is there's clearly an antecedent in other places. Now, there's counter arguments to this, like Les will say, well, actually, China influenced the West in that way into the India. We call it India. Remember, we're just talking about that continent, into that place there. And that's where it becomes the debate, and that's the interesting bit. They go there, they do this. That's all very interesting. So what we're trying to say there is, where is the cutoff date? So the example we were talking about today with Les and John is the fact that about 2000 BC, so let me put it this way, let me show you one example, sorry, this little segue that comes back, segue. So we're going to come back, right? Basically, the steps are there. I told you, I listened to about 28 hours of step culture from professors on me driving overall with all the, maybe about 35. And basically the steps are there. In the West and in the East, they go right the way across. And I never knew that. And they pretty much go right the way across. And you can get from one end to the other. Obviously, there's different mountain ranges, meet them and all that. But the point here is that horses don't seem to be in existence in most places. There's just no horses, or they're not domesticated. Now, I never knew this, but when it snows, a horse can move the snow and eat the grass. A sheep will die. In fact, sheep are not even natural. They're bred. They're goats, basically, bred to be woolly. So basically, in the steppes, so you don't have to carry fodder, they literally just captured all the wild horses and said, eat the grass. And the horses would eat the grass. And what they did then is they became a horse-loving culture. Now, these are white people, right? White people in the Caspian Sea, gingerish hair, blue, maybe not blue eyes, actually, I think they're brown eyes. Gingerish hair, we'll get to that because the blue eyes one, they go through Spain. I've not got my head around that yet. But basically, white people, Caspian Sea, dealing with horses, and they have a biology. And I am probably a product of their biology because they went this way. Now, when they went that way to China, you've got two things that happen here. Biology travels and culture travels. Now, biology is traveled through sex, rape, drugs, rock and roll and all that. You know what I mean? Basically, they're going across like, come on, get the bitches in. Drinking their yogurt alcohol, sleeping with all the women, crossing their DNA on. But culture also comes with them. So some people say, actually, they've got really good, but they're horses. They don't have to feed them in winter. That's amazing. So they adopt the horses. Now, in the Tarim Basin, what we're discussing with Les and John, is that basically in this area, there's the Chinese at the time, 2000 BC Chinese, right, are actually struggling because they've not got horses. And they're suddenly going like, look at these folk, half, maybe a little bit lighter skin because over generations they've mixed in with the people, but lighter skinned people, they seem to have chariots and horses and they're decimating our cavalry. They're just running up and massacring us. Right. Let's get to Persia. Let's rob some horses. They rob some horses. They bring them in. They start adopting Indo-European, this Caspian Sea people tactics, or this is generations and generations later. Basically, biology and culture has come all the way down to this Tarim Basin, and the Chinese, they hit each other head on, and they're like, okay. So what happens is, actually, biology-wise, they recede and they're defeated biology-wise, and they're sort of like white Asians are gone. Yeah, white Asians are sort of gone with, there's a few groups left about, but pretty much bred out. But the culture carries on. The culture is like a wave of ink that carries on. And what happens here is that suddenly they start getting chariots, they start, using horses, they've got all horse culture evolves, which they didn't have before. So if you say, well, we're cutting a cutoff time here, then if you put that in place, you would literally say, well, my cutoff is this point and China has horses. Then you have to say, well, did they independently just use horses like the people on the steps. No, you take it back and you go, oh, okay, they didn't independently do it. They got it from the steps. There we go. So you have to be careful when you put that line in. That line is movable depending on the situation. And you've got to be careful not to twist it so your argument is best. By yours, I mean anyone's. Anybody can move that line up and down and be like, okay, let's move it there. Let's move it here. So we have to be careful that you're not trying to do what's called confirmation bias, which is basically you're saying, I found some evidence for this. This is true. So hence we get back to the ninja stuff. So what we've got here is that we're finding, so we have to ask the question with this ninja magic. The ninja magic we're talking about, if you go back to my videos, is like, pulling eyes out of things, rubbing them on there, and maybe growing seeds inside of skulls. You've got to say that, okay, there's also a talisman one where it's got eyes in it. It's got eyes and it says a talisman against thievery. So you could say, did these people make a talisman against thievery with eyes watching for the thief? That was invented it's in Europe as well, and it's in Japan. Has that come from a single point and not biology? The culture wave has hit both ends. Is that true? Or have they independently picked that up? And you could say, obviously there will be an answer to it, but you could say, actually, eyes looking at thieves are probably common. That's all right, actually. That's quite good. That's quite good. But when it comes to ripping the eyes out of things, putting them on and seeing demons and spirits, that's a little bit, of a black dog in the 7th month. You're on the case of like, that's close. That's maybe too close to be independently pulled up. You're like suspicious. If I write a book, the Bansen Shukai, and then another Bansen Shukai comes out, which it did on Kindle, and I'm like, suspiciously like mine. You know what I mean? Did they independently translate it, or are they nicking it? That's the case. So we always have to remember that. So when we say, what is ninja culture? You're looking at a group of people who are biologically mainland China. They've come across multiple waves mixed in with the indigenous people of Japan, and eventually you get the Japanese. So the Japanese appear, and their culture is there, and we know what their culture is. They have a pre-Buddhist culture. They have a pre-Chinese culture, while it obviously has some, from effects from their first migration, you actually have a very distinct Japanese culture with Shinto and all that. But what you have to remember, it isn't distinct that it just evolved from its own place. It didn't just go, bing, and Japan. That's why the Ainu, the northern people, are different to the Japanese, because the Japanese and Ainu were once sort of the same thing, if you like, tribes of Japan. And bit by bit, Chinese mainland or Asia mainland culture comes in, mixes in, and you suddenly get a difference. You get two separate things, the Ainu and the other tribes, and you get the Japanese. And then there's the wave of Buddhism comes, Chinese Buddhism comes. Now, you have to understand this is not a Chinese religion. It is a religion that has been moved on by China. But what we have to remember is when those waves of people came before Buddhism and before Chinese influence, basically before the 5th, 6th century, 7th century, what's in Japan? And you can't just say they're Japanese, because you've got a cut-off point. The point here is that where did those things come from? Now, some of it will be indigenous Japan. Some of it will be, that's Fuji and he's the god, and therefore we're going to worship the god of Fuji. And then somebody else comes in and says, well, we've got this, and they come in. And eventually, after generations of isolation, you develop your own system. This is clearly seen in Anglo-Saxon versus Scandinavian, basically Germanic people. So the Germanic people, Anglo-Saxon, they have Donar for the thunder god, and you get Thor for the thunder god in the Norwegian. Now, actually, it comes from an Indo-European word called Dondar or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but it basically means thunder. Our word thunder, thundercat, comes from the Anglo-Saxon European word for thunder, and so does Donar, the thunder god, and Thor, the thunder god. So the idea is that you got the Germanic peoples, and you got the Viking peoples, the Scandinavians, and they basically are from the same original point, but they develop independently. So they're quite different, but they have a single point. So the question comes with the Japanese. They are independent, but have they got this wave idea of them being like culture waves coming on? So when we say this is a Japanese spell, but we find the exact same spell here, You're like, did they independently develop it? Or did it's come across in the wave years before and it's a remnant? So then you've got the problem. This is why we have problems in the culture wars today. It's like, is it Japanese? And you're like, well, yes, it is Japanese. Of course it is Japanese. The Japanese are using it. But where is it from? So when we say Japanese warfare, we are pretty much, it's very much Chinese warfare adapted to Japanese terrain and adapted to the Japanese social political, if you like, system. What I mean by that is originally in Japan, right? If you don't know this, originally in Japan, they had a Chinese army, not Chinese people, a Chinese style army of Japanese people. So many, each family did this, blah, blah. You had conscripts, you had taxes and all that. But what happened is the posh people in Kyoto were all there supping the tea and supping the wine. And what happened is bit by bit, they crumbled away their riches and they couldn't pay for the armies anymore. And who popped up in the way? There were those who serve, the samurai. And the samurai looked to their ancestors, and their ancestors are who? Chinese influenced Japanese people. So they're looking for Chinese, but we know that the Japanese developed different armor, or to arm to a certain extent. They definitely bring out a different sword, and they definitely then start to have a more individual style way of combat. And we know this for a fact. So what we find is that there are remnants of Chinese and Indian culture, meaning like, the Indian subcontinent culture that have come through. Buddhism's come there, the Chinese come there, and we get that. Remember, I'm using terms that so can place you geographically. Somebody pointed out, Les pointed out, was Nepal is probably more, but if we said Nepalese culture, you'd be like, people would be scratching their head then. So we're looking at the Indian, basically what was going in India, remembering that the Muslims then eradicated all the Buddhists. So what you've got there is this religion that has got no home. Its home has been taken over by Muslims, and then it's floating around the world, and little pockets of people are giving different spins on it. There's no central hub. So you get this type of Buddhism, that type of Buddhism. So in Japan, it comes across and you're left with X type of Buddhism. They like this type of Buddhism. That. So it's all remnants of a culture. So it isn't a case, you've got to be careful here, guys. When we talk about influencing the ninja, we're not talking about martial arts. There's no hand-to-hand combat. We're not talking about that. So anybody who's talking about Shaolin monks and Indian martial arts and all that, you're on the wrong path. Totally wrong. We're talking about the magic, the religious aspect, the cultural aspect. We're not talking about fisticuffs. Pugilism. Right, so what we're actually talking about is the fact that there are remnants of that Buddhist idea echo around China, echo around Kashmir and all that, echo around Korea, echo around Japan. And then they integrate with the local community and become more Japanese Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism. But it doesn't change the fact that it is an Indian religion, a Buddhist religion, basically. It doesn't, let's get rid of all that. It doesn't change the fact that it is a non-Chinese, non-Japanese religion that echoes across the world, on the Eastern world, and totally changes the face of Japanese culture, 100%, to the point where it is like literally the major religion, and it's only overtaken probably by Confucianism in the Edo period, because it's like, get in your place. So I know this is a long video. I know this is a little bit all over the place. So let me now sum up for you. So it's only about 30 odd minutes. Let me sum up for you. If I say to you, right, so somebody put in the thingy for everything, go to this time. So right now. Okay, if I'm going to sum up for you guys, what I would say is, if we're saying that there are remnants of things from ninjutsu that are possibly from the Middle East, possibly from India, possibly from China, that we know that they're remnants. They are parts of things that have come through from trade routes, from religion, and it's moved that way. But it also moves this way, and it also gets destroyed. Now, what happens is these remnants stay behind. They are then developed into a very Japanese system when they mix with the indigenous things to create the shinobi no mono. So when people say, are the shinobi Chinese? You're like, no, they're Japanese. Are the shinobi from India? No, they're Japanese. But they definitely have remnants of Chinese culture. They possibly, unproven, not a fact, may have remnants from Indian culture and possibly Middle Eastern culture. That is yet to be debated. That was only in a video because it was interesting to find. But we can say without a shadow of a doubt that the ninja have remnants of the Chinese culture. So if you, let's go back to our imaginary line. If you say, let's go for the first time ninja appear. The ninja will appear first time, or the shinobi, Jozu no shinobi or whatever it is, appear in the Taiheki, 1375 roughly. If we put our cutoff line to 1375 and you say, are the shinobi Japanese? You say, yes, they are. But if I move my cutoff line back to the 700s, you can say, are the shinobi Japanese? You say, well, actually, there's a heavy amount of remnants from Chinese culture in there. If I move it back even more, you see what I mean? Your cutoff point will dictate the answer to the question. So I've been asked many times, are the ninja Chinese? Yes, if you move that line all the way back. They're clearly heavily influenced by the Chinese. If I move my line to 1300s, are they Chinese? No. Okay, so it changes that's how you can manipulate history. So you've got to be careful with these lines. What we've got to say is, are the shinobi Japanese? Yes, they are Japanese, but they're clearly been influenced by Chinese culture, and Japanese culture as a whole is influenced from Buddhism, which is not Chinese, okay? So it's influenced from Buddhism and possibly other stuff. Now, there is some I'm going to say crazy because I don't know. There's some theories out there. That's wrong of me. I shouldn't say crazy. That's incorrect. There are theories out there that some of parts of the Middle East affected Japan. I've not followed up on these, but it's not impossible. But it's one of those where I've no idea. It's so outside of my scope of what I'm doing. It's interesting, but even the great Nigeria's, like there's some Jewish Kabbalah found in clearly found in stuff. I mean, it's literally there. And you got a lot of stuff that is in some ancient scrolls in Japan. And there is another entire theory of this Middle East people coming over, not them, but culture coming over. Guys, I am not for it. I'm not against it. I'm telling you outright, I have no idea. I've not followed it up, but people are saying it's there. I'd love to see it. But if it is there and this Middle Eastern Indian culture is in Japan, then echoes of it will pass on throughout the ages and may end up in your ninja scroll, because the reality of it is that we've got a tracking of documents. So the Middle Eastern Babylonian Talmud or whatever it is, we've got Fukushima Ryu. Okay, so Fukushima Ryu basically has this same spell as this one from 1,600 years before it, and there's clearly trade routes from the Middle East, India, China, Japan. And you're if you follow the document, starts there, ends up there. You follow the trade routes, starts there, ends up there. And you follow all the political things, starts there, ends there. Even though those people are biologically different, culture can travel. You suddenly have 0.00001% of a piece of culture in Japan. Now, for anybody to say Japan is pure, there is no influence from anywhere else, would be ridiculous. The same as if you said it for China, the same as if you said it for England, it would just be ridiculous. Everybody is, because of migration across the world, everybody's influenced by someone. But that doesn't mean that nobody has their own culture. It's about where you move that line. British culture is British. But for example, if I move the line on Britain back to 500 AD, well, it's 400 AD, we're Roman culture, yep, with very little British things left. If I move it back to 100 BC, pure British culture. If I go to 600 AD, it's Anglo-Saxon culture. You see what I'm saying? So where you move that line will differentiate what it is. I am an Englishman, even though my DNA says I'm Scandinavian, I'm a Viking, and I'm an Irishman. Probably back in the day, Vikings came along. Well, actually, the reason it's not that is because both my nans were Irish descent. My fathers were English descent. That's why I have the mixture. It wasn't ancient. It's just that family, my family from the north, was probably there for 900 years, 1,000 years, and just, milling about in the villages. Both my nan's side were milling about in the villages. And because of World War II, they suddenly clashed in the middle, and I'm 50-50 either way. Handsome on both sides of the face. Right. Okay, guys, that's 35 minutes of the Cummins rambling. Please, if you've got to the end, support me. Do get it. Get yourself a copy of How to Be a Modern Samurai. It's on Audible as well, which is superb. Whew, remember, none of this is an argument between me and Les. This is what we chat about every day, and things come up, and Les was concerned that I hadn't explained this correctly. I've probably still not done it, but at least if somebody is saying to you, Anthony says ninjas are from India, no, he's not. He says remnants may be there. Anthony says ninjas from China. He says, no, they're not. Remnants may be there. Again, get involved with the debate. All right, guys. Let me know what you think below. Please tell me if I got anything wrong. It was all from memory, from driving along on the great. If you ever got time or if you've got an Audible account, look up the great courses. It's amazing. You can literally learn so much just driving about in your everyday life. Right, throat dead.